This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment podcast. And I'm so excited to welcome to our global community today somebody who we've had the pleasure to get to know with our day job as Key Recruitment. And actually, I think is possibly popping her podcast cherry, although she has done some industry talking. So it's always lovely when I have somebody on that's not done an actual podcast before, because I know that you'll put your arms around her and make her very welcome in our community. So without further ado, this is Natasha Klymczuk, who is the director of Kennedy Fox. Welcome to you today, Natasha. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Nice to see you again.
It's very nice to see you again as well. And for anyone who is watching on YouTube, I just think you've got one of the nicest back views that sounds wrong, but you've got this beautiful vista behind you, this garden. It's not snowing now where you are, I hope.
No, it's not. Although the sun's come out, and anyone that's connected with me on LinkedIn knows my biggest gripe is the weather in Manchester. So we've got some sunny weather in January, which is great.
It is. But as we record this in January, we've just had like this deep freeze -8. A week later, it's about 8, 10 degrees, and it feels like practically spring-like out there. I bought some daffodils yesterday, so if it all goes wrong, it's my fault.
Wild.
So without sort of, assuming anything about your business, people will be clicking on
Yeah.
you on LinkedIn. Can you give us a synopsis as to what your business does, and then more importantly, your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, so Kennedy Fox, broadly speaking, we operate in manufacturing sectors. So that's across industrial, engineering, and scientific areas. So that could spread from anything from raw materials and ingredients, packaging, logistics, nuclear power, and we're all sector specialists. We operate globally, so mid-management up to senior exec positions in mainland Europe and the US predominantly. We do a little bit in APAC, but less so.
Okay. And you're based in Manchester?
So we're all remote based.
Oh,
I live
okay.
up in Manchester. The office is in Leeds, but we meet once a week. So all the guys are sort of an hour or two's commute within the office. We like to get together and see each other.
There's loads of things we're going to talk about there because I think that the topic of remote versus hybrid versus office, that topic ain't going anywhere. We've been
No.
talking about it for 5 years and I think it's more important than ever.
hmm
And you, just in terms of your background, because you
hmm
came from the industry, right? So talk us to
Yeah.
me into recruitment.
Yeah, so I started my life, it feels like a lifetime ago. I'd actually did a nursing degree,
Oh, wow.
which seems like a lifetime ago, but it's actually come full circle now, which is interesting. But I realised quite quickly that nursing wasn't for me. I
Right.
left university 12 weeks before qualifying, so didn't even finish. Yeah, it was a bit of a rash decision, but one that at the time I wasn't sure if it was right, but looking back on it, it definitely was.
Wow.
I worked in social care for a couple of years prior to that, and then I got a phone call from a graduate recruitment agency saying, "Hey, we've seen your profile and I'd registered on Indeed, Monster, whatever.
Mhm.
I thought maybe a sales role could be interesting for me. I wanted to get out, do some different stuff. Went to, the graduate recruitment days are intense. They put 100 of you in a room and then they kind of
Wow.
pick in in groups of 10 and you either get through or you don't. I was given a load of interviews and they presented me to a company in Leeds called Stevenson's that manufacture soap base into cosmetics and personal care
Right.
sectors. So selling to like brands and contract manufacturers. But what was interesting about that was there was an international travel element to it. And I thought, yeah, I'll have some of that,
Oh,
please.
definitely
Um,
great holidays.
So I was like, that sounds good to me. Knew nothing about sales. Obviously, they were willing to take on in essence, a grad. I was 22 or something, and it was a total gear change from working in the public sector. Let's put it that way. But
Okay.
I had a great time doing that, traveling. I was managing sort of high number of accounts, small value
Right.
type proposition. It was a junior role for me. I
Yeah.
was a sales rep, moved into account management. And then moved to a both customer and supplier of that business, managing a commercial team, selling specialty oils into cosmetics. So working with some brands that you'd probably know, you'd see in the supermarkets, and then some of the big guys as well, selling all like the nice essential oils and things, which was
Oh, I love
interesting. So
it. I bet it
both
was.
manufacturing and distribution, which was pretty good.
Impactful, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. When I was thinking about leaving Stevenson's, I was called by one of the big high street recruitment agencies about a role. And then we got through the screening call and said, "Oh, actually, we think you'd be quite good in recruitment. What do you think?" I'd never even considered it. went through the interview process there and decided not for me. And the reason being, I was traveling a lot. I was getting out around Europe. I'd got customers in Asia, and
Wow.
I didn't want to lose that aspect of my
No.
job.
Mm.
And it was looking after a postcode, within such a bit, it was a global high street
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just decided it wasn't for me, put that to bed, and that was that. And then when I was in the commercial leadership role, I was contacted about another job by another recruiter, and they were more of a sort of mid-management, senior exec kind of business.
Right.
Speaking to the guy there, who I didn't know at the time, he just moved into research, into a consultant role, had a really, really good experience chatting through the job. The job wasn't right for me for various different reasons. He agreed, I agreed. But, and it wasn't a planned conversation. I went, well, I considered recruitment in the past. Basically, have you got
Oh,
any jobs?
anything.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, I'm not sure, but let me have a chat with my boss and we'll go from there. And then 8 weeks later, I'm sat at a recruitment desk and I'm a recruiter now. And I
Wow.
was like, okay, that's a lot. And honestly, it's the best thing I've ever done. There was a period of time where I didn't know if I'd made the right decision, probably 18 months in, which is, I think, pretty standard for anybody coming into
It's a brick
recruitment. You
wall.
get to that 18-month, 2 year point and you go, have I made the right decision or not? And I'm so glad I stayed because it's the best decision I've ever made. And having worked in industry
Yeah.
and then recruiting in the industry that I've worked in, and certainly in the beginning, it had so many benefits, so many benefits.
There's just so much to unpick there, not least starting with, that I guess your end point that I
Mm,
think hiring people from the industry that you operate within and that you recruit within just gives you that kudos and that credibility and the ability to, have a different level of conversation than so often is the case, unfortunately, when people come into recruitment from different backgrounds. You're almost learning two things. You're learning recruitment and then you're
mhm,
learning the industry. And I
mhm.
just think I've seen it so many times where you see the best recruiters because they know their market inside out already.
Mhm.
So I'm
Yeah,
really, really pleased we're talking about this today.
yeah. I think it's interesting because when I moved into recruitment, you start speaking to candidates, you start speaking, and especially when you're having the client conversation.
Uh,
Understandably, it's why would a client trust you with a role, especially a retained role, when you've got very little recruitment experience? But I think I was really lucky that I was in an environment where I'd got a lot of supportive colleagues, and the conversation with the clients early on was, you're right, I don't know a great deal about recruitment, but there's 20 other people in this business that know about recruitment.
yeah.
But and I was recruiting roles that I was familiar with. I was looking at sales roles and things like that, jobs that I'd done. So I understood the challenges of things like supply chain or the actual impact of when, I don't know, the euro goes crazy and the exchange rates go wild, or one time there was,
Manufacturing costs have gone up. You've seen it.
yeah, yeah,
And I think even sort of if we just take your industry as an example, I think somebody that's coming in, say that's done a degree, is maybe sat in the traditional background of recruitment has very often, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just going to stay neutral
yeah,
for a minute, but has traditionally been, call center, that kind of environment or B2B sales. I think when you have been in the industry, yes, you might not know the full recruitment process yet, but
yeah.
you can ask the questions, but you also understand the market. And I think it's where people tend to fail is where they have to try and understand what I don't understand what that means. If the euro goes up, how does that impact? I haven't got an understanding and then still don't understand the recruitment process. I am going to throw a bit of a bomb under it though, and it's a
Mhm.
personal experience of mine. That I started my career in engineering recruitment, wasn't
Yeah,
in and I was at this point the top biller in the whole company. And it was because I just asked more questions than anyone else. I made more calls than anyone else. I didn't work longer hours than anyone else. I actually was in and out in the contracted hours, but I know that I just got on the phone more and asked more questions. And we hired somebody who came from engineering. She was an engineer herself. And I was then tasked with training her, which that's a whole different podcast because I was not a
yeah.
trainer. But I was tasked with training her and observing her and then feeding back, which I've realized I was quite sneaky, but anyway. And she was awful. She just, I remember her interviewing these engineers and she'd just go, so you do this, you do this, you do this. Brilliant. Didn't ask any questions. Now that's obviously an extreme example. So I
Mm.
think, I guess the bomb under it is yes, you need industry, you have to have industry experience, but it's that curiosity to ask questions. I mean, is there like a balance there?
100%. And I think if you're going to work in recruitment search at whatever level, whether it's, I can only speak about permanent recruitment, I can't talk about contract, but it's a certain personality type. So it's not just having the industry background, it's having the right personality type, it's having the resilience, it's having all of those other things that kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle in place. But I also think when you're coming from it's closely related, an industry to recruitment, if you're in a sales environment, because it's still selling,
Yep.
but it's a very, very different sale. And
Yes.
you have to unlearn things as well. And that was something that I realized quite early on. I had a couple of quick wins that gave me a bit of a false sense of security, and I won a couple of retainers quite quickly. And I thought, it's a dream, this. It's easy. What have I been doing? But I learned that lesson hard, fast. But you have to unlearn stuff as well. And I think that's the challenging bit is,
Mm.
okay, you know how to sell, you know the sales piece, but ultimately when you're there's loads of things that you could go into, but you're manufacturing a product, it's there, it's sat in your warehouse, it's ready to go, it's ready to be shipped. In recruitment, you've got stakeholders at either end of those conversations and trying to make those matches happen. People have got gut feelings, partners, commitments, and things like that. Whereas when you're selling a product, it's only one stakeholder, and that's a real switch up.
It is almost definitely. And I wonder whether the Natasha the nurse or the near nurse, we're going to call it,
Yeah,
whether you knew deep down that the reason you weren't going to flourish in that amazing career, by the way, I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
anyone that goes into nursing is an actual angel.
Oh yeah,
Is that deep down you knew that you wanted to, maybe put yourself out there and do more of a sales role. Maybe you kind of knew that about yourself. I mean, there's clearly something
yeah,
that the recruiters were spotting when they were trying to bring you into their high street businesses. Can we talk about the brick wall that you hit? Because I
yeah.
think it's something that doesn't get talked about enough.
Mm,
I I have talked about it, and I probably should share it a lot more on LinkedIn to those that are probably experiencing it and that maybe thought it was the post-COVID slump that was the brick wall, but the brick wall happens inevitably. So can you describe to me, if you can remember, because I realise we're going back a
yeah.
while, but I think it's really important. How did you know you were hitting this kind of disillusioned learner after 18 months? You'd had this early success.
Mm.
What point did you go, I'm going to stick with it, even though it's tough? And what did you do to ensure that you worked through it and got through to the other side?
Yeah, so Helen, the owner at Kennedy Fox, had was a really big part of that. So Helen and I worked together at the first recruitment business that I joined. Helen left, set up Kennedy Fox, and that was that. We stayed in contact. We were building a friendship. We'd not known each other very long. We were working in different teams, but we got on. So when I hit that kind of I was actually interviewing, I was talking to people back in industry, other distribution companies. Look, I was taking that really seriously going back, and Helen was giving me a few pointers around, you know, almost interview techniques and things like that. And have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? And all that stuff. And she said, you know what, Tash, I don't think you've given this a good enough go. Why don't, from what she'd seen of us working together, why don't you speak to other, recruitment contacts that she'd got? She'd only set the business up a couple of months when we were having this conversation. Helen certainly wasn't ready to hire. Helen wasn't in that place. So, she was putting me in touch with other recruitment businesses and, just saying have the conversation or not, but give it a bit of a go. But I think it came from I'd had some early success. When you start in recruitment, you don't have what's the word? The word escapes me. A track record of billings. It's very up and down. You'll have a couple of months where you do well. You might blank for 2 or 3 months, and it's very, very up and down before you get a level of consistency. And I'd hit a real kind of flat peak. I was also commuting. I'd moved up to Manchester from Leeds because my partner lived there, so I've made that move. I was doing a long commute, could I do a different job somewhere else? I don't think I want to work for another recruitment business. And all of these thoughts are going through my mind, and all of those impact, especially when you're doing, a couple of hours commute each way and stuff like that. But yeah, Helen basically said, give yourself another year, 18 months, and then come back to me and tell me what you think. And I sat on it for another 6 months, and then Helen was in a place to hire. And yeah, that's that. And I've been with Candy Fox just over 5 years.
A perfect storm, so to speak.
Mm,
I think what you've described, obviously your personal situation might be slightly different, but I think
yeah.
there'll be a lot of people where they've possibly possibly given up at that point.
Mm.
Especially because the market has been so erratic. And I think that's the word that, eluded you maybe, because I think that's perm recruitment anyway. I think it tends to
Yeah.
be big peak and trough. And I
Mm.
think if you don't get that, is there an element of luck to it sometimes? Possibly, certainly
Yeah.
I
In the
think in your
beginning.
early career there is. I think that your early career, I think you then make your luck. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
I think it's something that should get talked about more. And I think that's why we sometimes see people jump around every 2 years because they're
Mm.
hitting that brick wall, either in their learning, in their market, in the business. Maybe there's a disconnect between leadership and the actual billers, possibly. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough because it takes a lot of fortitude, I think, to do this job. And I'm
Mm.
not comparing it to nursing at all,
No, no, no.
do a job consistently and
Yeah.
persistently and be successful at it and still want to get up and do a commute and whatever it is. So I think I'm
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
grateful to you for bringing that up because I think it's more common than anyone realizes.
Yeah, and I also think as well when you've had the wins and you know how good it feels and you feel like you're doing well at your job and then you do dip. Um, I don't love the analogy that recruitment is like a roller coaster because I think if you say that, then you create that
Reinforcing
environment for
it.
yourself. But it does fluctuate, and the ability to manage your own emotions through that is something that's really difficult. And if you don't know what you're going to expect in that, it's
Yeah,
it's it's another thing that compounds it as well. You get in your own head, and then it's not going well, and then you're pushing that.
manifests
And
itself.
actually,
Yeah,
another month later, and then I was back, back doing
fine.
doing well again. But it's just getting used to that. And I think when you come from industry where you're used to, and certainly in the environment I was in, I wasn't selling one product once. I was selling something that was a contract. People were making cosmetic products, and then they relied on that product.
Yeah.
And so it was contracted, so they could continue their manufacturing process. Whereas particularly in permanent recruitment, which is where I've been sat, it felt very hard to forecast. It was questions like, well, where's your business coming from? And the question was, I don't know
No,
what the answer is to
I
that.
actually don't know. Yeah.
Because it's a totally different environment. And then obviously you start building your regular clients and you understand the market and you understand how hiring is cyclical. And then you start to be able to get a bit better feel for something. But when you come from selling a contract, you're going to be supplying something for the next 2 years. It's a very different headspace to, okay, I've completed this project. Now what?
Now what? I
Yeah.
agree. It's going to be a perfect segue into why you do retained as a business. But just before we do, someone shared with me a meme last night, actually. I wish I could remember the full words of it, but it basically summarized what that last section has been about, which is the recruitment is the sort of job that when it's going brilliantly, you are literally the queen of the world. And when it's going
Yeah.
badly, you don't want to ever talk to anybody ever again. And it
Yeah.
can all happen in one day, can't it? Let's face it.
Totally. And I think once you get to a place where you can, that's the best place to be. And I don't think it's about somebody who's necessarily bringing in the most money. It's about actually who can consistently do their job day in, day out, be relied upon, and can, for your own kind of sanity as well and your own well-being, to know that actually I can consistently do this at whatever level. That was always the goal for
I
me.
agree
It's
with you.
never
I mean,
about being the biggest
recruitment
biller.
recruitment as a career is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And those
Mm,
that endure and those that will, I think, outperform any economic out of our control turmoil are
mm.
those that continue with consistent activity, consistent mindset, or adding to it all the time, but it's that consistency and continuity, and I totally agree with you. So yes, you are a retained specialist. So was this the memo that was set out from the start, or did you transcend from contingency into retained? Just give us a little bit of a sort of, I guess, set the scene as to why retained.
Yeah, when I joined the first recruitment business, I had to be told the difference between contingent and retained work. I had no idea. I pretty much walked in on day one and went, what's recruitment? Um, so and that business was doing a split of retained and contingent work, and that was a nice mix for them. So that's what I was doing. I was probably doing 30-40% retained or something like that once I'd got up and running, which was a good place to be in your first year. It was a nice place to be, and also it gave you the flexibility of being able to kind of learn and make mistakes with the contingent work as well, because when you're retained on an assignment, it's really important that you follow that through. Whereas if things like managing candidate and client expectations, you need to learn that as you're going along, and retained mandates are not the place to learn that. but now working pretty much 100% retained, um, has always been the goal for me personally, because I like the relationship that that develops with your clients and also your candidates. And I think as you're working on more senior hires, the expectation is that you're going to be retained anyway. And I think for the credibility of your client when you're going out in the market, it's really important when you're approaching senior candidates, or if something's confidential and you're working under NDAs and things like that. We do a lot of that at Kennedy Fox, and you can't do that without being retained, because of the risk both to you and also your client. It's important that they're represented properly in the market and the candidate experience is good and is the best.
And I think from what you've said, I mean, it just that I get this real sense of classiness about your operation, the fact that you're industry specialists, you know your markets inside out, and you're positioning it that this is the way we work to get the best
Mm.
result for you, our customer, and that's client and candidate. And
Mhm.
I think if you were to look at the recruitment industry as a kind of, I guess, as a visual, because I'm quite a visual person, that to me is like the cream of the crop of how it should be done. Whereas everyone else is in this bum fight, everyone else is doing the spam emails and the e-shops and having to do the 100 calls a day and, not getting the target, not being able to answer the question, what,
Mhm.
what your projected income is going to be.
Yeah.
Do you think it's if you go back to Natasha that was starting out all those years ago, that was moving from industry, going for the interviews, obviously, you landed in quite a nice company by the sounds of it, but just go back a little step. If somebody had presented to you retain, do you think you had the credibility to do that there? And then our audience is a lot of new recruiters, and I think people seem to think that you have to be, I don't want to say age, but of a certain gravitas to be able to sell retain. What's your view on that?
The first two pieces, excuse me, put my teeth back in. The first two pieces of business I won were retained assignments. Um, so no, I think it's about understanding the benefits. Contingent work has got its place. If we take an assignment on, it's retained, but we do place candidates contingently because we know somebody who's going to be a good fit for a certain business and we present them, then obviously, if that then goes through the process, we're not going to charge a retainer fee for that and it's on success. But I think understanding the benefit, if somebody's got a really hard role to fill or it's confidential, then there really isn't another way of doing it. If if the contingent route was the right route, then you would put a job advertisement up. Hopefully, you'd get loads of people applying, and they wouldn't need our help. Is my view. Or if we know a candidate, if we take a brief, and I just know that somebody's going to be
Yeah.
good for the job, or anybody at Kennedy Fox, we'll present that candidate because we know them. But if we're going to take an assignment on where we're going to put work into it, go to market, take our time and really represent the brand properly, it has to be retained
And
because it's
and
a
if I
partnership.
may, yeah, that's the partnership. And if I may, from our point of view, we've always positioned it as a perm recruiter.
Mm.
You either work in a retained way because it's the best way to get to partner your clients properly, or you are exclusively partnering the key talent you're just talking about, where you can then say, I know which company I'm going to go and call for you.
Mm.
That client then is in a win-win situation as well. I love that that's your answer, because when I've had guests on previously about retained, that second element often, and I don't mean from a snobbery point of view, but it almost gets poo-pooed as no, it's retained or nothing. Otherwise, you're just in a bum fight. And you're right. There are different
Yeah.
solutions for your clients if you've got that relationship with them.
Yeah, and I think it, cliches are cliches for a reason, but one size doesn't fit all. And I think if you're working, especially with senior candidates and they want to be presented to certain businesses, we've had a lot of success with that and actually going through with your candidates who are the right businesses for them and why. Um, then if you are presenting these candidates to people that you don't have relationships with, you've done your research, you know your market, and at the end of the day, your clients know your market better than you could ever possibly do. Um,
Agreed.
yeah, so
Even an
it's
industry expert like you saying that.
well, well, yeah, because it's things like I don't know, they might have done a mixer and a social with somebody else, or they know someone's unhappy somewhere, or there's other moving parts to another business, or rumbles in the industry that you just don't get by reading and doing research.
No, that's very true. If you were a leader watching or listening to this now, and you know that you need to scale, at pace this year. I don't mean bad numbers, but just, you need to bring people in, because let's face it, if you're still trading as a recruitment leader, you're probably going to snap up all the business where people haven't been so successful.
Hmm.
You were presented with a recruiter who had recruitment experience but no industry experience,
Hmm.
somebody coming from industry but really wanted to become a recruiter. What would your advice to them be in assessing who's the right hire for them?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think cultural fit's always the first thing because coming out of industry, I think if I'd have gone to another business where people weren't as supportive and willing to chip in and give you advice and support, I don't think I'd have done as well, and I think I would have left very quickly. But that goes the same from somebody who's really experienced. You could pick me up and put me in another organisation, and it wouldn't work out. So I think cultural fit first and foremost. I think if you're willing to take somebody on from industry with no recruitment experience, like with a grad, the power of learning through osmosis is really, really important. And the fact that I was office based 4 or 5 days a week was really helpful. I picked things up a lot quicker. We're a remote business. We've hired people who haven't got recruitment experience and are doing very well. But you have to be patient because they're not learning from hearing a call across the room or
Absolutely.
and it's definitely possible. And it works out well, but you need time and patience, and you need
Take
to
up for it.
allocate your time to do that and to really absorb them into that.
That's harder on both parties, actually. It's harder on the leader training the person or whoever's responsible for the training element, and it's harder on the person, I think. So it's really encouraging to hear that it's worked well for you, because
Mm.
I've forgotten that we were going to talk about that as well. There were just so many elements to your introduction. I was like, forget the bit about hybrid and remote.
Yeah.
I think there's been some quite controversial posts recently about and the debate rages on, and the reason it rages on is because it was kind of thrown upon most recruitment businesses to adapt in COVID, and as
Mm.
have become used to, well, no one knows what normal life is anymore. Everyone's a bit confused, and so many leaders are a bit like, well, we think we should be doing this, but we're not sure. And what I like is when a business is like, this is what we are, this
Yeah.
is what works, and we're not going to change. So
No.
if there's anyone listening now that is, again, a leader that really in their heart knows that they worked really well when they were remote or maybe hybrid and have almost forced themselves back into the office, what would your advice be to them?
I think you've got to do what feels right for you and right for your business and your people. I think if you've got you're not going to keep everyone happy 100% of the time, but if you've genuinely got a group of people that are really behind what you're doing, then it will work. It's about having the right people to push that forward. And, we've had challenges with that over the last 5 years. Every recruitment business has, and there's always a turnover of people that do or don't fit the business culture and where you want to be. But I think giving people warts and all about how it is working for your business and what the expectations are. The expectations have got to be very clear about if you
Yeah,
are remote working, what you expect from that, then that's all you can do really. And that's the due diligence piece, isn't it?
I agree.
Um, it's I think it's unfair to say if you sell your organization of somewhere that's completely flexible because you're remote based, but then you do expect people to be sat behind the laptop 8 till 7, then that's not true flexibility, but just be
That's
honest
not,
about it because
yeah,
different environments suit different people. You
yeah,
know, we're remote based. We have core working hours between 10 and 3 where we need to be able to get hold of you. But outside of that, people are where they need to be. So if we've got an internal meeting, it's at 11 o'clock, we expect you to be there. But um, if you've got other things that you need to be doing at that time, that's also fine, providing that there's nothing from the business need that's getting in the way of that. If you're working in the US, we don't expect you to be sat at your desk at 10, maybe sat at your desk at 12. That's
different
then
property.
you've got to be able to self-regulate and manage your own time. I'm a fan of a 9 till 5, so I tend to do sort of more traditional business hours, but I might dip out for an hour. But somebody else with kids might dip off at 3, have a couple of hours, come back to it in the evening. So it's just selling the truth, I think.
I mean, you positioned it as warts and all when we started this conversation, but what you're actually finishing with is truth. It's just
Yeah,
being
yeah.
honest. And it's a really key word that gets overused all the time, or a key phrase, which is setting expectations. And I think, you clearly as a business have got that bit right in that, our expectations are at 10 till 3, we need to be able to get hold of you. The rest of the time, you run your business, your desk like a business. You do what works well for your
Mm.
environment. And I think for me, when we get asked this question probably more than anything else, even more than what's the right commission structure, is what should we be doing? And I always answer with what you started that section with, which is you have to do what's right for your business.
Yeah.
And that's by asking the people you currently have. It's by, sometimes it's a bit of trial and error. You have to maybe see how it goes if you are looking to maybe go back to being fully remote again. You see, to me, fully remote, you'd never see each other, but the fact that you do get together means that I don't think you're remote. I think you feel very connected.
Yeah.
And clearly the communication. I ran a remote business for many, many years until Lilia started, and obviously we are then in an office together because she's learning and she would do it. We're 100% doing osmosis. I mean, our boundaries are we're mother and daughter, so we don't want to have it at
Yeah.
home. That's a slightly different consideration, but I think it's so important that as a remote business leader, you understand that your level of communication needs to be brilliant and then some. Because
Yeah, and I think you have to put things in place to be able to maximize that, whether it's Teams chats, WhatsApp's group, but also you've got to make sure, and this is why we put the 10 till 3 core hours in, is that if somebody's working till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, I want to turn off then and enjoy time with my partner, my dog, so everyone's got to have the switch off point as well, and that's got to be managed as well. So it's important to get them right, and it is trial and error. We've had some trials, we've had some errors, but we feel like we're in a good spot with that. And I think the social element's really important because that's where you get so much enjoyment from your job. We travel a lot, we're at industry exhibitions, going in. Well, we did a grand tour of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, Helen and I, in 3 days. Last week, going and visiting client sites. So when you're doing that together, it's nice team bonding as well. You're spending.
Honest. That's why we should be doing the job, because we want to be around the people that we work with and then the clients we get to. So I think it sounds like you've kind of over the years, and obviously you've talked really openly here, and I think people will definitely take away from this that you have to find what size fits your business. But at the heart of it, it's about enjoying what you're doing, whatever that looks like. And if you enjoy being in an office 5 days a week, by the way, anyone listening that's doing that and that works for your business, great, I'm all for it as well. So what a nice way to conclude your first podcast, and I hope it's the first of many because you've been absolutely brilliant.
I've had a great time. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And nursing's loss was definitely recruitment's gain, that's for sure. But it's been so lovely to chat to you. And for anyone that's interested to chat to Natasha, all her contact details will be available on this audio and video episode. And thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.